Hi guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into a little corner of Roman history that's, well, let's just say it's a bit aromatic. We're talking about a time when your morning routine might have involved something that would send most of us running for the hills. Imagine stepping out of your cozy Roman villa, ready to seize the day, only to realize the air smells less like fresh dew and more like a very well-used public latrine. History has often overlooked the sensory experience of the past, focusing more on the visual or the textual. But imagine navigating this world purely through your nose. It's a testament to human adaptability, really, that they not only survived but thrived in such an environment. And believe it or not, this particular dental disaster was considered a sign of good hygiene. Now, you've seen the Roman patrician and the common plebeian, the bustling markets and the public baths. But what about the backbone of the empire, the formidable Roman legionaries? These soldiers, renowned for their discipline, engineering prowess, and sheer fighting spirit, were constantly on the move, establishing Roman rule across vast territories. You might wonder, how did they handle oral hygiene on the march, far from the amenities of Roman cities? Did our peculiar mouthwash make it into their standard issue kit? Imagine yourself as a Roman legionary, trudging through the mud of Germania, or sweating under the desert sun in Egypt. Your pack is heavy, filled with armor, weapons, rations, and basic camping gear. Every ounce counts. So, would you really be carrying a heavy amphora of fermented urine for your morning swish? Probably not in large quantities. But the principle, perhaps, remained. While there isn't extensive historical documentation detailing the precise dental routines of individual Roman soldiers on campaign, we can infer quite a bit from their pragmatic approach to life. Roman military camps, or castra, were engineering marvels. They were meticulously planned, often including sanitation facilities, though these would be far more rudimentary than urban baths. They understood the importance of hygiene for preventing disease in crowded conditions, as a sick army was a vulnerable army. It's unlikely that every soldier carried a personal supply of specialized urine. However, the basic ingredients for producing it, namely human waste and time, were always available. A unit might have designated areas for collection, or perhaps a pragmatic centurion would see the value in setting aside a communal vat for this purpose. After all, if it helped keep the men healthy and their teeth in fighting shape, it would be a small logistical challenge for a military known for its organizational genius. A soldier with a truthac is a soldier who can fight effectively. Moreover, Roman soldiers were known for their resourcefulness. Away from the urban centers, they would have relied on whatever local resources were at hand. Chewing on sticks, rubbing teeth with abrasive sand or ash from their campfires, and rinsing with whatever liquid was available would have been common. If they understood the cleansing properties of aged urine, it's not hard to imagine them improvising its production in the field. It would be a testament to their adaptability, making do with what they had, even if it meant a less refined, perhaps even more potent, version of our Roman mouthwash. Historians are still debating the exact degree to which specific civilian hygiene practices, like the regular use of urine mouthwash, translated directly to military life on campaign. While the Roman military was highly organized, the realities of constant movement and austere living conditions would have necessitated simpler, more portable solutions. However, the core idea that ammonia-rich substances could clean teeth would have been a piece of practical knowledge that could be applied even in the harshest environments. So, while you might not have seen a legionary proudly displaying his personal urine flask on parade, rest assured that the Roman soldier, ever practical, would have found a way to maintain some semblance of oral hygiene, even if it was just a quick swish with whatever dental solution could be produced in the wilds of the empire. Their focus was on keeping the fighting machine healthy and functional, and every little bit of practical hygiene, no matter how unappealing, contributed to that goal. You've braved the Roman morning routine, navigated the peculiar markets, and even enjoyed the century onslaught of their unique mouthwash. We've talked about the what and the why of Roman urine mouthwash, but let's delve deeper into the sheer sensory experience of it, specifically the smell. For us, the very idea is a potent olfactory assault. But how did the Romans cope? And what does it tell us about their relationship with odors? Imagine pouring a small measure into your mouth. Now, you've splashed your face, maybe even giving your teeth a rudimentary scrub with that twig. But the main event, the dawn of Roman oral hygiene, is yet to come. You walk into a slightly more private area of the house, perhaps a small, cool room, and there it is, a sturdy amphora, or a large clay jar, sitting in the corner. It's not filled with water, or wine, or olive oil. No, this vessel holds something far more distinctive. This is your Roman mouthwash. The initial wave of scent hits you before the liquid even touches your tongue. It's sharp, acrid, unmistakably ammonia. For a modern person, this would trigger an immediate gag reflex, a desperate need for fresh air. But for a Roman, this was a familiar, perhaps even comforting, aroma. It signified cleanliness, efficacy, and routine. Their noses, you see, were probably far more accustomed to a wider spectrum of smells than ours. Think about the environment they lived in. Rome was a city of millions, bustling, vibrant, and incredibly aromatic. The smells of cooking fires, overflowing sewers despite their impressive aqueducts, urban waste management was still a challenge. Unwashed bodies, animals, tanneries, and various industries all mingled in the air. Public spaces were not sanitized with air freshness. Bodily functions were more openly acknowledged. In such a world, a strong, pungent smell wasn't necessarily a sign of disgust. It was often just part of the background noise of life. This acclimatization to a strong odor profile meant that their perception of what constituted bad or unpleasant was likely different. What we consider overwhelming, they might have registered as merely present. The ammonia smell of their mouthwash, while potent, might have simply registered as a sign of its active ingredients, much like the strong smell of bleach registers to us as a sign of its cleaning power, without necessarily making us gag. It was a utilitarian smell, tied to a perceived benefit. There's also a psychological element at play. If you grow up with a certain practice, if you're told by your parents and your doctors that it's beneficial, you internalize its normalcy. The smell, however intense, becomes associated with a positive outcome: cleaner teeth, better health. It's similar to how some people develop an appreciation for the strong, unique smells of certain foods or traditional medicines that might initially be off-putting to outsiders. Historians still debate the extent of sensory desensitization in ancient populations, but it's clear their daily olfactory landscape was far richer and more challenging than our own. Moreover, the Romans were master perfumers and enjoyed strong, often complex scents. They used rich incense, fragrant oils, and floral perfumes. Perhaps these strong aromatic experiences also trained their noses to be more tolerant of, or even less reactive to, other powerful smells, even those that we would deem unpleasant. It's a fascinating thought. Did their love for strong perfumes inadvertently prepare them for the robust bouquet of their morning mouthwash? So, as you perform your daily rinse, you wouldn't be holding your breath or fighting down nausea. Instead, you'd likely be focused on the feeling of cleanliness, the slight tingle on your gums, and the hope for a brighter smile. The powerful aroma would simply be a part of the process, a sign that the dental disaster was, in fact, working its peculiar magic. It's a profound reminder that our sensory experiences, especially our sense of smell, are incredibly shaped by our cultural context and historical environment. You've braved the Roman morning routine, navigated the peculiar markets, and even enjoyed the century onslaught of their unique mouthwash. But like all things, even the most deeply ingrained habits eventually fade. As the mighty Roman Empire began its long, slow decline, stretching over centuries, so too did many of its distinct practices and technologies. Our beloved, or perhaps reviled urine mouthwash was no exception. It eventually slipped away into the dusty annals of history, replaced by other, less pungent, forms of hygiene. The reasons for its decline are multifaceted. As the Roman Empire fragmented and its vast networks of trade and governance weakened, the organized collection and distribution of this commodity likely became more challenging. The centralized system that supported the phalanx and public latrine collections would have faltered, making it harder for people to readily acquire large quantities of aged urine. Necessity, which once drove its adoption, would now drive its abandonment. Moreover, cultural shifts played a significant role, and before you recoil in disgust, let me paint a picture of why this particular liquid, which to our modern noses screams biohazard, was considered a perfectly acceptable, even beneficial, part of their daily routine. The concept of a refreshing, minty mouth rinse just didn't exist in their world. Their understanding of health and hygiene was rooted in practicality and what they observed to be effective, even if the why was often a mystery to them. With the rise of Christianity, which gradually became the dominant religion across the former Roman lands, there was a growing emphasis on spiritual purity and modesty. While the use of urine for practical purposes might not have been explicitly forbidden, the increasingly refined sensibilities of a new era might have slowly rendered such a public and intimate practice less acceptable, or at least less fashionable. As societies evolved, so too did their notions of what constituted proper hygiene and personal decorum. What was once pragmatic might now be viewed as crude or unsanitary. Then there's the loss of knowledge. As the Roman world transitioned into the early Middle Ages, much of the scientific and medical understanding of classical antiquity was lost or fragmented. The detailed works of writers like Pliny the Elder, which documented these practices, might have become less accessible or less understood. Without the underlying, albeit primitive, scientific justification for why it worked, the practice might have simply faded into obscurity, dismissed as an old, strange custom. Historians are still debating the exact timeline and specific reasons for the discontinuation of this practice across different regions of the former Roman Empire. Was it a rapid disappearance or a gradual fade-in? Did some isolated communities cling to it longer than others? The evidence is often sparse, leaving room for much fascinating speculation. New materials and methods also began to emerge, while older ones gained renewed prominence. Simpler abrasives, like crushed charcoal or more readily available plant materials, might have become the preferred methods for tooth cleaning. The economic landscape changed, and the unique supply chain for urine diminished. People simply moved on to other things, forgetting the strange dental habits of their ancestors. So, you witnessed the slow twilight of an era. The grand public baths fall into disrepair, the bustling markets are less vibrant, and the dedicated urine collection points become relics of a bygone age. The distinct, sharp aroma that once permeated Roman life slowly dissipates, replaced by the smells of a new, different world. It's a testament to how profoundly connected our daily habits are to the larger forces of history, politics, economics, religion, and the inexorable march of time. The dental disaster, once a common sign, quietly retreats from the stage of history, leaving us to marvel at its strange and fleeting existence. So, we've journeyed through the pungent past, witnessing the Roman surprisingly pragmatic approach to oral hygiene. You've swished, you smelled, and you've hopefully gained a new appreciation for modern dental care. Now, let's bring it all back to the present, reflecting on this ancient dental disaster through the lens of modern science and what it tells us about progress, ingenuity, and the ever-evolving nature of human cleanliness. From our 21st century perspective, the idea of using aged urine as a mouthwash is, to put it mildly, deeply unappealing. We have gleaming white porcelain sinks, fluoride toothpaste in a rainbow of flavors, antiseptic mouthwashes, and regular trips to the dentist. We understand bacterial decay, the science of enamel, and the role of sugar in cavities. We know why our methods work, down to the molecular level. But here's the interesting part. The Romans, without any of this advanced knowledge, were onto something. They observed that aged urine made teeth whiter and perhaps even helped with bad breath. And they were correct, in a primitive way. The ammonia, created through the breakdown of urea, is a bleaching agent. It does have some disinfectant properties. It was a crude, uncomfortable, but fundamentally effective solution based on empirical observation. They didn't know about pH levels or bacterial colonies, but they saw a result, and they stuck with it. This highlights a fundamental truth about human ingenuity. Often, solutions are found long before the underlying science is fully understood. The Roman practice served as a vivid reminder of how far we've come in terms of public health, chemistry, and personal hygiene. Imagine a world where a trip to the dentist meant agonizing extractions or, worse, nothing at all. For the Romans, clean teeth and fresh breath weren't just about social niceties. They were signs of health, of prosperity, and even of moral uprightness. A gleaming smile, or at least a non-rotting one, could say a lot about a person. And when they looked around for a substance that could achieve this, they landed on something that was readily available, surprisingly effective in certain ways, and, most importantly, free. This isn't some obscure, one-off ritual performed by a fringe cult. The discomfort of urine rinse pales in comparison to the agony of a raging tooth infection. Their methods, however strange, were attempts to mitigate real suffering and maintain health in a challenging environment. It also makes us reflect on our own modern practices. What seemingly normal things do we do today that future generations will look back on with utter bewilderment, perhaps even disgust? Will they marvel at our reliance on plastics, our endless commutes, or our peculiar social media habits? History is a constant mirror, showing us not just where we've been, but also inviting us to question our present. Historians are still debating whether the psychological impact of such practices, beyond the physical effects, contributed to the Roman identity or resilience in ways we can't fully grasp. Was there a certain pride in enduring the unpleasant for the sake of health? This story isn't about judging the Romans, it's about understanding them. It's about appreciating their resourcefulness, their practicality, and their unwavering determination to solve problems with the tools at hand, even if those tools were a bit unorthodox. The dental disaster, once a common sight, quietly retreats from the stage of history, leaving us to marvel at its strange and fleeting existence. So, as you tuck yourself in, perhaps with the faint, comforting horror of a fan, remember the Romans. Remember their strange solutions, their resilient spirit, and their surprisingly clean if not minty fresh teeth. Let the quiet hum of your room become the distant murmur of ancient Rome, a city filled with peculiar smells and resourceful people. The world slows down, and the faint echoes of history blend with the soft sounds of the night. Your thoughts drift, pulled gently by the currents of time. You're floating now, between the ancient world and the present, a quiet observer of all that has been and all that will be. The dental disaster of the past fades, becoming a gentle whisper in the darkness, a lullaby from a bygone era. You are safe, you are warm, and the soft blanket of sleep begins to settle over you, light as a Roman toga, embracing you completely. Let go, and simply drift. You'll know, this was a mainstream practice, woven into the fabric of daily life for many Romans. From the bustling streets of Rome to the quiet villas in the countryside, the amphora of mouthwash was a common sight. You might wonder, how did they even discover such a unique application? Well, history often shows us that necessity is the mother of invention, and sometimes, desperate times call for truly desperate measures. Imagine a time before dentists as we know them, before fluoride, before a basic understanding of bacterial decay. Your teeth hurt, your breath smells, and you're looking for anything that might help. Perhaps someone observed that specific substances seem to clean things, or perhaps someone noticed that people who handled certain waste products had surprisingly white teeth. History doesn't give us a clear eureka moment for this particular discovery, and historians are still debating whether this practice originated independently in Rome or if they borrowed the idea from another ancient civilization. It's one of those tantalizing little mysteries that makes history so fascinatingly frustrating. The fact that this custom became so widespread suggests that, to them, it worked. It must have provided some perceived benefit, even if that benefit was simply better than nothing. Think about it. A world without readily available antiseptic, where infections could easily turn fatal. Any practice that seemed to ward off disease, no matter how unconventional, would be embraced. And let's be honest, the human body is full of surprises, and ancient peoples were far more attuned to the nuances of natural processes than we are, even if their interpretations were sometimes a bit off kilter. So, the amphora, it's unsealed, or perhaps covered with a simple cloth, allowing whatever magic it contains to mature. There's a small, wooden ladle resting beside it, clearly meant for dispensing. The air around it is subtly different, a faint, sharp scent that hints at its contents. This is not going to be a refreshing blast of peppermint, my friend. This is going to be an experience, an unforgettable, slightly gut-inducing, but ultimately routine experience that sets you apart from anyone living in the 21st century. It's a stark reminder that even the most basic aspects of daily life, like brushing your teeth, have undergone massive transformation throughout history, often in ways that would make us squirm today. The simple act of preparing for this daily ritual in ancient Rome highlights a vast cultural chasm between their understanding of hygiene and ours. And trust me, if you lived back then, you'd probably have to get used to it pretty quickly, or you might not even make it past the first day without an embarrassing social blunder. It's a world where cleanliness, at least by our standards, was a truly relative concept. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You can almost hear your inner modern self protesting, but your Roman self simply accepts it as the way things are, a small price to pay for what they believed was a healthy mouth. So, you're standing there, ladle in hand, staring into this fascinating and frankly, a bit horrifying amphora of liquid. You might be thinking, why this? Why urine? Well, my friend, the Romans, in their pragmatic way, understood a few things about this particular bodily fluid that we're only just rediscovering in certain niche scientific fields today. The key, it turns out, lies in its chemical composition, specifically something called ammonia. Now, don't imagine freshly produced urine here. That would be even worse. The Romans, bless their practical hearts, knew that fresh urine wasn't quite as potent for their purposes. They preferred aged urine. Yes, you heard that right. They would let it sit, sometimes for days, sometimes even longer, allowing it to ferment. During this process, the urea, a compound naturally present in urine, breaks down into ammonia. And ammonia, my friends, is a powerful cleaning agent. Think about modern household cleaners. Many of them contain ammonia for its ability to cut through grease and grime, leaving surfaces sparkling. The Romans, without our understanding of chemistry, observed its efficacy. They didn't know why it worked, just that it did. This ammonia acted as a bleach and a disinfectant. When you swished it around your mouth, it would help whiten your teeth by breaking down surface stains. Imagine it like a rudimentary, all-natural if somewhat off-putting, whitening strip. It wasn't just about aesthetics, though. The disinfecting properties of ammonia would have helped to kill some of the bacteria in the mouth, potentially reducing bad breath and even preventing certain types of gum disease or infections. Of course, they didn't have microscopes to see the bacteria, but they could certainly observe the effects. Whiter teeth, and perhaps a less offensive odor emanating from one's mouth, at least immediately after use. It's a classic example of ancient people stumbling upon effective solutions through trial and error, long before the scientific principles behind them were understood. Historians are still debating the precise methods of aging and preparing this urine, and whether different types of urine, say, from men, women, or even specific animals, were thought to have different potencies. It's a fascinating, if somewhat gross, rabbit hole of historical inquiry. Did they prefer the urine of vegetarians for a milder scent? Or perhaps that of wine drinkers for a more robust bouquet? We simply don't know for sure, and that's part of the fun of this kind of history, filling in the blanks with a bit of imaginative speculation. What we do know is that this wasn't some random, desperate act. It was a deliberate, recognized practice. Beyond oral hygiene, urine had a multitude of uses in Roman society. It was used in tanning leather, as a mordant in dyeing fabrics to help the color stick, and even as a fertilizer for crops. There were public latrines where urine was collected, often for a fee, and then sold to various industries. So, the Romans had a very different relationship with this particular waste product than we do. For them, it wasn't just waste, it was a valuable, versatile commodity. This practical approach to resources, often born out of necessity in a pre-industrial world, highlights their ingenuity. They wasted nothing, and found a use for everything, even if that use makes us slightly queasy today. So, as you slowly pour a small amount of this fermented liquid into your mouth, you still yourself. The initial whiff is pungent, a sharp, almost biting aroma that makes your nose wrinkle. You can almost feel the ammonia tingle in your nostrils. This is the moment of truth. This is Roman dental care, in all its strange, utilitarian glory. It's a far cry from your minty fresh paste and sparkling mouthwash. But in this ancient world, It was state-of-the-art. Now that you've grasped the pungent chemistry behind this Roman dental secret, let's take a little stroll through the bustling streets of ancient Rome, specifically to the places where this precious commodity was collected and sold. Seriously, no pressure. Just looking for funks who appreciate a good, slightly weird historical deep dive. And if you're up for it, drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always wild to think about people listening to this from all over the world, maybe even tucked into bed in a completely different time zone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because, believe it or not, this wasn't just something you whipped up in your backyard. For many, it was a purchased item, a testament to the ingenuity of Roman commerce and their ability to monetize, well, everything. Imagine yourself navigating the crowded forums, the air thick with the murmur of voices, the cries of street vendors, and the truly impressive array of smells. You're on a mission to procure your daily dose of mouthwash. Where do you go? You head towards the public latrines. Yes, you heard that right. Roman public toilets weren't just places to relieve oneself. They were also vital collection points for this highly sought-after liquid. These weren't shy, tucked-away facilities. Many were large, communal spaces, often quite grand in their architecture, where Romans would conduct business, socialize, and, yes, contribute to the empire's various industries. You might see large vats or amphorae strategically placed outside these latrines, sometimes even inside them, specifically for collection. There would be designated attendants, probably slaves or freedmen, whose job it was to manage these collections. They'd be the ones ensuring the vats were filled, perhaps stirring the contents to encourage the fermentation process, and then overseeing its sale. It's a job that required a strong stomach, certainly, but it was a legitimate, if somewhat humble, profession within the Roman economy. This was an example of Roman pragmatism at its finest, finding a valuable use for what would otherwise be considered waste, and creating an entire supply chain around it. You approach one such collection point. There might be a small queue, not unlike waiting for your morning coffee. But instead of a barista, you're dealing with someone who has, shall we say, a very intimate relationship with their product. You see other citizens, perhaps a woman in a finely draped stole, or a sturdy soldier, casually making their purchase. The transaction is probably quick, a few small coins exchanged for a measure of the yellowish liquid, poured carefully into your own small flask or jar. It's all very matter-of-fact. No visible signs of disgust or embarrassment from either party. This is just how things are done. Historians still debate the exact pricing structure and market demand for this specific commodity, but it's clear it was integrated into the broader Roman economy. The people selling this weren't just random scavengers. They were established businesses, known as fullers, who were particularly interested in large quantities of urine. Fullers were essentially ancient dry cleaners. They used urine for washing and bleaching wool and cloth, as the ammonia helped to clean and brighten fabrics. So, while you might be buying a small amount for personal use, these fullers would be buying huge quantities, perhaps even directly from the public latrines themselves, or employing their own collectors. Imagine the sheer volume needed to clean all the togas and tunics in a city like Rome. The dynamic between beer and cellar would have been fascinating. On one hand, you have the common citizen, perhaps a bit sheepish, but accepting of the necessity. On the other, the vendor, whose livelihood depends on this unique trade, probably viewed it with a detached professionalism. There's a certain casualness to the whole affair, a testament to how normalized this practice was. It highlights a fascinating aspect of ancient life, the close proximity to natural processes, and the pragmatic acceptance of things we now go to great lengths to distance ourselves from. You might even hear a bit of casual banter, perhaps a joke about the vintage of the day's batch. It's a peculiar marketplace, indeed, but one that was essential to the daily routines of many Romans, from cleaning their clothes to, yes, cleaning their teeth. You've successfully navigated the bustling market, perhaps even exchanged a knowing glance with the purveyor of potions, and now you're back in the relative quiet of your Roman dwelling, your small flask of unique mouthwash in hand. But here's where things get even more interesting. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution for every Roman. You wake up with the first rays of the Roman sun filtering through a small window. The city is already stirring, a symphony of distant murmurs, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, and the occasional bray of a donkey. You stretch, your limbs protesting slightly from a night spent on a straw mattress. The air, even indoors, carries a distinct blend of olive oil, sweat, and something vaguely metallic. Just like today, where some opt for high-end electric toothbrushes, and others prefer a simple manual one. Social status in ancient Rome dictated quite a bit about your dental hygiene routine, even with something as seemingly universal as urine. If you were a member of the Roman elite, a wealthy senator, a revered general, or a patrician lady with a villa overlooking the Bay of Naples, your experience with this particular hygiene ritual might have been slightly elevated. You wouldn't be casually queuing up at a public latrine. Oh no, your slaves would handle such mundane tasks. Imagine your personal attendant, perhaps a highly trusted and educated Greek slave, discreetly acquiring the finest, most appropriately aged urine for your morning rinse. They might even have a dedicated amphora, perhaps a beautifully decorated one, specifically for this purpose, stored in a cool, dark corner of your lavish home. It's all about maintaining appearances, even when dealing with something so utterly unglamorous. The quality of the urine might even have been a point of subtle distinction. Did the urine come from healthy, well-fed individuals? Was it aged just so, reaching that perfect peak of ammonia potency without becoming overwhelmingly putrid? These were the kinds of nuanced concerns that might preoccupy the household manager of a wealthy Roman family. It's a bizarre thought, isn't it? Debating the vintage of your mouthwash. But in a society obsessed with status, every detail, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, could be a marker of your position. Now, if you were a common plebeian, living in a cramped insular and apartment building, your experience would be far more direct. You'd be the one heading to the public latrine yourself, or perhaps pooling resources with neighbors to buy a larger batch. Your flask would be simple, utilitarian, and the quality of the urine probably less a matter of connoisseurship and more a matter of whatever's available. Yet, even for the average Roman, the act of using this substance for oral hygiene was a shared experience, a common thread that ran through society, regardless of wealth. It highlights how certain practices, born out of necessity or perceived efficacy, can transcend social boundaries, even if the execution differs. Historians are still debating the extent to which this practice permeated all levels of Roman society equally. While texts mention its use, the specifics of how the very poorest Romans managed their oral hygiene are less clear. Did they collect their own? Did they use less refined methods? It's likely that for many, even this specialized urine might have been a luxury, and simpler, perhaps less effective, methods were employed, like merely rinsing with water or rubbing teeth with abrasive herbs. This distinction in dental hygiene mirrors other aspects of Roman life. The wealthy had access to better food, better medical care such as it was, and certainly better plumbing. While the concept of using urine was widespread, the ritual surrounding it, the source, and perhaps even the perceived cleanliness of the source, would have varied wildly. It's a fascinating insight into the Roman class system, where even something as intimate as personal hygiene became another arena for displaying wealth and status. So, as you prepare to take that first swish, consider whether you're doing so in a marble-clad bathroom, attended by slaves, or in a tiny, shared space, just hoping to get your teeth a little whiter before heading out to face the day. The simple act belies a complex social hierarchy underneath. Alright, you've got your special Roman mouthwash, whether acquired by slave or by your own hands, and you're ready to embark on this rather unique oral hygiene journey. Now, imagine yourself standing there, perhaps in a quiet corner of your living space, or maybe in a shared courtyard if you live in an insula. This isn't a solitary act to be hidden away. It's a part of daily life, and while perhaps not performed in the middle of the forum, it's certainly not something to be overly secretive about within the family unit. You take a small sip from your flask or dip your ladle into the amphora. The initial sensation, as the liquid touches your tongue, is bracing. It's sharp, pungent, and quite unlike anything you've ever experienced. There's no refreshing mint, no pleasant tingle. This is the scent of ancient Rome, an olfactory tapestry woven from human endeavor and, frankly, a lot of unmanaged waste. You can almost feel the grit under your bare feet as you swing them off the bed. Outside, the aroma intensifies, a layered experience that would make modern sanitation engineers weep. Instead, you're hit with that distinct ammonia tan, the smell that, if you weren't prepared for it, would probably make you gag. But you're a Roman, you're tough, you're pragmatic, and you know this is good for you. You swish it around, really getting it into every crevice, feeling the liquid work its magic. Now, imagine the sound. There's a quiet sloshing, perhaps a little gurgling. It's not loud, but in the early morning quiet, it might be just audible enough to signal to others in your household what you're up to. Perhaps your spouse is still asleep, or your children are beginning to stir. What's their reaction? Probably nothing. This is normal. This is just how things are. But for us, transported back in time, it's a moment of profound cultural dissonance. You might even catch a glimpse of your reflection in a polished bronze mirror, perhaps a slight grimace, or a determined sit to your jaw as you power through the rinse. And here's where the slight awkwardness, the subtle humor of the situation, truly comes into play. Think about sharing a small Roman home. Personal space, as we know it, was a luxury. You're performing this very intimate, very pungent act, and your family members are just there. Perhaps your mother-in-law is grating cheese for breakfast nearby, seemingly oblivious to the pungent fumes you're emitting. Or your child, still half asleep, wanders in and watches with wide, unblinking eyes, already accustomed to this daily ritual. There's no judgment, just acceptance. It's a wonderfully human moment, where the mundane and the slightly disgusting coexist in perfect harmony. Historians are still debating the precise social etiquette around this practice. Was it polite to do it at the breakfast table? Probably not. Was it something one did behind the screen, or simply out in the open? It likely varied from household to household, influenced by social standing and personal preferences. But the fact remains that living in close quarters meant that personal hygiene, in all its forms, was often a communal experience. You simply couldn't escape the sights, sounds, and, most importantly, the smells of your family's daily routines. Once you've swished sufficiently, you spit into a designated basin, perhaps, or even just directly into a gutter if you're outside. There's no fancy porcelain sink with running water to whisk it away. The smell, for a moment, intensifies before slowly dissipating into the ambient Roman air. You might then rinse your mouth with plain water, or simply wipe your mouth with a cloth, leaving behind what the Romans believed was a clean, healthy mouth. And if you happen to catch a whiff of your own breath afterwards, it's likely far better than it was before the rinse, even if not quite minty fresh by our standards. This seemingly simple act of oral hygiene underscores a fundamental difference between ancient and modern life: the constant, inescapable presence of bodily functions and their associated realities. There was less hiding, less sanitizing, and a greater acceptance of the raw, unfiltered aspects of human existence. It's a fascinating glimpse into the rhythms of Roman family life, where even a dental disaster could become a perfectly normal, if slightly amusing, part of the morning routine. With your mouth now feeling cleansed in the Roman sense, at least, let's talk about why they went through all this trouble. It wasn't just about feeling vaguely disinfected. The Romans, like many ancient civilizations, had a strong aesthetic sense, and that extended to their teeth. While they didn't have the blindingly white smiles you see in toothpaste commercials today, they certainly valued a bright, healthy-looking set of pearly whites. A discolored or visibly unhealthy smile could be a social handicap. It might suggest poor health, a lack of personal care, or even low status. After all, if you couldn't even manage basic hygiene, what did that say about your overall character? So, while our modern obsession with perfectly aligned, bleached white teeth is a relatively recent phenomenon, the desire for an attractive smile is as old as civilization itself. The Romans wanted their teeth to be as white as possible, and they were willing to try almost anything to achieve that. This brings us back to our star player, aged urine. Remember the ammonia? That's its bleaching power at work. It breaks down the organic matter that causes stains on tooth enamel. There's the pungent tang of stale bread, the sharp bite of wood smoke from countless cooking fires, and that unmistakable, earthy sweet smell of human activity, often in close proximity to the sewer system, or lack thereof. You make your way to a small basin, ready to start your day, no gleaming porcelain, no chrome fixtures. Just a simple terracotta bowl and a pitcher of water, drawn from the communal well. So, after a consistent routine of swishing with this pungent concoction, you would indeed notice a difference. Your teeth would appear whiter, perhaps not sparkling white, but certainly a few shades lighter than they would be otherwise. This was their version of a cosmetic dental procedure, a DIY whitening treatment that was surprisingly effective given the available technology. But it wasn't just about the aesthetics. A clean mouth, even if achieved through unconventional means, also contributed to better breath. While the Romans probably had a higher tolerance for bodily odors than we do today, nobody wants to be the person with truly foul breath in a close conversation. Imagine trying to conduct important political discussions in a forum, or charming a potential patron with breath that could fell a horse. Even in ancient Rome, a degree of fresh breath was surely appreciated, and this urine-based mouthwash would have helped to neutralize some of the more offensive odors caused by lingering food particles and bacteria. It's important to remember that their diet was also quite different, with less sugar and processed foods, which certainly help with overall dental health. But still, bad breath was a reality. Beyond the urine, Romans experimented with various other tooth whitening and cleaning agents. They used abrasive powders made from crushed bones, eggshells, or oyster shells mixed with honey. They even used pumice, a volcanic rock, to rub on their teeth, which sounds incredibly damaging to enamel, but highlights their dedication to the cause. And historians still debate the extent to which these various methods were used in combination, or if certain methods were preferred based on personal preference or regional availability. It's likely that a Roman seeking the whitest smile might have employed a multi-pronged attack, combining the ammonia rinse with occasional abrasive scrubbing. This pursuit of dental aesthetics, however strange its methods, shows us that human concerns about appearance and social presentation haven't changed much over millennia. While we might reach for a tube of whitening toothpaste, the Romans reached for a pot of aged urine. The tools are different, the smells are definitely different, but the underlying motivation to look good and feel confident remains remarkably similar. It's a testament to the enduring human desire to put our best face and teeth forward, even if it means embracing a bit of a dental disaster. So far, we've explored the personal, practical, and even commercial aspects of this Roman oral hygiene routine. But how did the medical minds of the era view this practice? What did the physicians and scholars of ancient Rome, the equivalent of our modern doctors, have to say about using urine as a mouthwash? It turns out, they were very much on board with it, albeit with an understanding of health that was profoundly different from ours. Ancient Roman medicine, while surprisingly advanced in some areas like surgery and public sanitation, think aqueducts and sewers, was still rooted in the humoral theory. This theory, inherited from the Greeks, posited that the human body was composed of four basic humus: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Health was achieved when these humors were in balance, and illness resulted from an imbalance. Their understanding of dentistry and oral health fell under this broader medical framework. They didn't know about bacteria or cavities in the way we do, but they certainly recognized the symptoms of oral disease: toothaches, bad breath, and decaying teeth. From their perspective, urine, particularly aged urine with its strong, pungent qualities, was considered to have various medicinal properties. It was seen as a powerful agent for cleansing, drawing out impurities, and even strengthening the gums. They would likely have attributed its whitening effects to some inherent purified quality, rather than the chemical action of ammonia. It was a visible, tangible result, and in a world where direct observation was a primary method of scientific inquiry, that was enough. You splash water on your face. The cool liquid a temporary reprieve from the ever-present warmth. As you reach for something to clean your teeth, you won't find a sleek plastic toothbrush with minty toothpaste. Oh no, your options are limited, and rather surprising. Perhaps a frayed twig, or a rough cloth rubbed with some abrasive powder, like crushed bone or charcoal. But even more intriguing, and frankly, a bit unsettling, is the preparation for what comes next, the rinsing. Prominent Roman medical writers and naturalists like Pliny the Elder, even documented the use of urine for various medicinal purposes, including oral hygiene. In his monumental work, Natural History, Pliny, a fascinating figure who compiled vast amounts of knowledge from his time, mentions the practice. He notes that urine, specifically from a young boy, was considered particularly effective for whitening teeth. Now, why a young boy's urine? This is one of those intriguing details that historians still debate and try to unravel. Was it thought to be purer, less adulterated by diet or disease? Was simply a cultural superstition? We don't have a definitive answer, but it highlights the blend of empirical observation and folkloric belief that characterized ancient medicine. They might also have believed that the strong, acrid nature of the urine helped to harden the gums or prevent decay by some unknown mechanism. In a time when tooth extraction was often the only solution for severe tooth decay, any preventative measure, no matter how unusual, would have been welcomed. So, while we might cringe at the thought, the medical establishment of ancient Rome largely endorsed this practice as a legitimate and beneficial part of oral care. It was simply good medicine, as they understood it. This reliance on observation and traditional beliefs, even when those beliefs seem strange to us, is a hallmark of pre-modern medicine. They were doing the best they could with the tools and knowledge available to them. And in a way, they were right about the cleansing properties of ammonia, even if they didn't understand the chemistry. It's a powerful reminder that progress in science and medicine isn't a straight line, and that our ancestors, for all their seemingly bizarre practices, were often trying to solve very real problems with clever, if sometimes unsavory solutions. You, as a Roman, would have trusted your physicians, and if they said it was good for your teeth, then good for your teeth it was. Having explored the Roman morning routine and the medical perspective, let's now follow you to one of the most iconic and essential social spaces in ancient Rome, the public baths. These weren't just places to get clean, they were community hubs, centers of gossip, business, exercise, and relaxation. And yes, even here, our favorite pungent oral rinse might have made an appearance. Imagine the sheer scale of a Roman bathhouse. The air is thick with steam, the murmur of countless voices, the splashing of water, and the distinct aroma of olive oil, sweat, and perhaps a faint hint of that familiar ammonia. You move from the Apolloterium changing room to the Palestra exercise yard for a quick workout, perhaps some wrestling or ball games. Then, it's off to the Tepidarium warm room, the Coldarium hot room, and finally the refreshing Frigidarium cold plunge. It's a multi-hour affair, a vital part of daily life for many Romans, rich and poor alike. Within this bustling environment, personal hygiene was paramount. Romans didn't use soap as we know it. Instead, they would rub themselves down with olive oil, then scrape it off with a stridular curved metal tool, taking all the dirt and sweat with it. This was often done by slaves, or by oneself, in a very public setting. So, in an environment where bodily functions and personal care were openly performed, the idea of rinsing your mouth with urine wouldn't have been out of place at all. While there might not have been designated urine mouthwash stations next to the hot tubs, it's entirely plausible that individuals would bring their own small flasks of the prepared liquid to the baths. After all, you've just spent young sweating, exercising, and likely eating some snacks from the bathhouse vendors. Your mouth might feel less than fresh. What better time to perform a quick, teeth-whitening rinse? You might discreetly step aside, perhaps into a quieter alcove or even back into the changing room, to perform your routine. The social aspect here is fascinating. People would be chatting, laughing, discussing politics, and observing each other. While using urine as mouthwash was common, was it something you would do openly in the Frigidarium while having a conversation? Probably not. You know, that fresh, clean feeling after a good mouthwash. Yeah, well, there's West different. Very different. You might even catch a whiff of it being prepared in a corner of the house, a faint, ammonia-like scent that tells you what's coming. This is your reality, a daily ritual that sets the stage for a day of Roman life. Teeth gleaming hopefully and breath. Well, we'll get to that. It was a private act, even within a public sphere. This highlights a subtle distinction. Acceptable practices weren't always performed without some level of discretion. It speaks to the idea that even in a society with different standards of modesty and hygiene, certain bodily functions were still handled with a degree of personal space. Historians still debate the specific social nuances of how and where this oral hygiene practice was performed within a public bath context. Did certain social circles view it as perfectly normal to swish and spit, while others preferred a more private moment? It's hard to say definitively. You might see a wealthy Roman, attended by their slaves, having their hair styled, their skin oiled, and perhaps a small flask presented for their oral rinse. Or you might observe a common laborer quickly swishing and spitting before heading off to their next task. The baths were a melting pot of Roman society, and observing the various personal care routines would have provided a fascinating glimpse into the lives of people from all walks of life. Ultimately, the Roman baths were a place of total sensory immersion, sights, sounds, textures, and indeed, a rich tapestry and smells. And amidst this vibrant tapestry, the discreet, yet effective, use of urine as a mouthwash would have been just another, perfectly normal, part of maintaining one's personal care, however peculiar their methods seem to us today. Now that we've seen you navigate in the Roman world with your unconventional oral hygiene, let's step back for a moment and put on our historian's hat. You might be wondering, how did this rather peculiar practice even begin? Was it a stroke of genius, a sudden revelation, or something borrowed from another ancient culture? This is one of those wonderfully thorny questions where historians are still debating the precise origins and influences. One theory suggests that the Romans stumbled upon this practice through sheer observation and trial and error, much like they discovered many other practical applications for readily available resources. Imagine a Fulanica, a Roman laundry and dry cleaning establishment. Fullers were the experts in cleaning fabrics, and they used vast quantities of aged urine for its ammonia content, which effectively degreased and whitened wool. It's not a huge leap of imagination to think that someone, perhaps a fuller themselves, noticed their hands were cleaner, or perhaps their teeth seemed brighter after exposure to the substance. Or maybe they simply observed its cleaning power on fabrics and wondered if it could apply to teeth too. It's a very Roman way of thinking, pragmatic, resourceful, and focused on what works. However, another strong possibility is that the Romans weren't entirely original in this particular habit. History is full of cultural exchange, and ideas, even the strange ones, tend to travel. Some scholars point to evidence that other ancient civilizations might have used similar, if not identical, methods for oral hygiene or other forms of cleaning. For instance, there are accounts of ancient Egyptians and even some early Germanic tribes using substances for cleaning that had similar chemical properties, though not necessarily for teeth. Did the Romans, with their extensive network of trade and conquest, pick up this habit from an eastern or northern neighbor? Did a merchant bring the knowledge, or did a returning soldier, having seen it in action elsewhere, introduce the idea? The challenge for historians is the lack of a definitive smoking gun, no ancient Roman equivalent of a patent application or a how-to guide explaining the invention of urine mouthwash. Most of our knowledge comes from scattered references in texts by writers like Pliny the Elder, who describe existing practices rather than their origins. So, piecing together the true story involves a lot of careful deduction, comparing practices across cultures, and interpreting often vague ancient writings. It's also important to consider the underlying scientific or proto-scientific thought of the time. As we discussed, the Romans didn't understand chemistry as we do. Their explanations for why something worked were often based on observation, philosophy, or even superstition. The sheer volume of smells, from the aromatic herbs used in cooking to the less pleasant effluvium of the city, meant that the Romans had a very different relationship with their noses than we do today. They lived in a constant bath of smells, and what we might find offensive, they simply considered part of the background noise of life. It makes you wonder how sensitive their sense of smell truly was after a while. So, whether they independently arrived at the conclusion that aged urine whitened teeth, or learned it from others who had, the reasoning behind it might have been quite similar. It cleans things, so maybe it cleans teeth. This kind of historical uncertainty is precisely what makes history so engaging. We're not just memorizing dates. We're piecing together fragments of a puzzle, trying to understand the minds and motivations of people long gone. And in the case of Roman urine mouthwash, the enduring mystery only adds to its quirky charm. It's a vivid reminder that what we consider normal is entirely dependent on our time and place, and that our ancestors were just as ingenious, if sometimes a little gross, in their solutions to daily problems. So, as you swish, you might be participating in a tradition that spans centuries, or even millennia, across different cultures, passed down through the dusty annals of time. Having pondered the murky origins of this Roman practice, let's widen our gaze beyond the 7 hills of Rome. You might be relieved or perhaps more horrified to learn that the Romans weren't the only ones with unconventional ideas about cleanliness. Other ancient civilizations, across different continents and eras, also had their own peculiar methods for oral hygiene, proving that when it came to brushing or swishing teeth, innovation knew no bounds, no matter how strange. Take the ancient Egyptians, for example. Those masters of mummification and monumental architecture also had a keen interest in oral health, perhaps because their diet, rich in bread that often contained sand from grinding stones, was notoriously harsh on teeth. They were among the first to develop a kind of toothpaste. It wasn't a minty gel in a tube, of course. Their recipe often included crushed rock salt, mint, dried iris flowers, and pepper, all ground into a fine powder. Imagine rubbing that abrasive mixture on your teeth. It would have been quite effective at scrubbing away plaque and stains, though probably not very gentle on the gums. So, while they might have had better breath, they might also have had a fair bit of gum irritation. They were also known for using chewing sticks, which were essentially frayed ends of branches from aromatic trees, serving as a rudimentary toothbrush. Then there's the intriguing case of ancient Babylonians and Chinese, who are also credited with early forms of chewing sticks, sometimes made from specific herbs or were thought to have medicinal properties. These weren't just for cleaning. They were also believed to freshen breath and ward off evil spirits, blurring the lines between hygiene and superstition. Imagine a quick chew on a willow stick before an important meeting with the emperor. Even closer to home for the Romans, some evidence suggests that certain Celtic tribes in Europe used their own unique concoctions for tooth care. While the specifics are harder to pin down than for the well-documented Roman and Egyptian practices, it's clear that the idea of using various plant-based ingredients, abrasives, and sometimes, yes, even animal products, for oral hygiene was a widespread human endeavor. These practices were often deeply intertwined with local resources, traditional knowledge, and whatever ingredients were readily available in their environment. What all these diverse methods share is a common goal: to maintain oral health in a world without modern dentistry. Whether it was the Egyptians' abrasive powders, the Babylonians' chewing sticks, or the Romans' ammonia-rich mouthwash, these were innovative, if sometimes uncomfortable, solutions to a universal problem. And historians are still debating the precise cross-cultural influences and independent innovations in ancient oral hygiene practices. Did some ideas spread along trade routes? Or did similar problems simply lead different cultures to similar and similarly strange solutions? It's a fascinating puzzle that highlights the shared human desire for health and cleanliness, even when approaches diverge wildly. So, as you reflect on your Roman dental experience, take a moment to appreciate that across the ancient world, people were creatively tackling the challenge of keeping their teeth and gums healthy. It makes your Roman mouthwash seem a little less isolated in its oddity, part of a larger tapestry of human ingenuity and sometimes dental disaster across the ages. And it certainly makes you thankful for your modern toothbrush and minty fresh toothpaste, doesn't it?